Good morning, Tuvalu, and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 9 of Star Trek Picard, Hide and Seek, watch-along. Let's just tone those engine hums down a bit. Where today, yes, it's been a long road, getting from 8 to 9. It's been a long time, but the time has finally come. I will see this story conclude at last. I will watch it die. No, I'm not gonna get up and leave this time, but it's not gonna change my mind. 'Cause this show shit! And it's going, no, okay. Yeah, last time, the first time, I kind of gave up around episode 6, and then 7 and 8, that was it. We stopped doing them. This time, on this last watch through we've been doing this past week, let me just get this time bar back up. We saw more positives, but it is a lot of not much is happening in the story is in the background of the plot, which, yeah, it's not been great. The last two episodes, 7 and 8, I think we found out last time that 3 things happened across all the episodes, which I think is why it's been the bounce-off time at both points. But, episode 9, I've never seen this. Alex is not here today, so I'm very free and open to talk about it. Doesn't look like we have anyone joining us currently on the live stream, but it said that the only time it hasn't said that is the time no one was joining us on the live stream. So if you don't know what's happening, because some of you are probably joining here for the first time, we're gonna do a watch along. So I obviously cannot stream just a Paramount production show. I can't do the audio either, so we're gonna turn off these engine hums as we get closer to the actual watch through, and we're gonna sync up our times. So as it says on screen, you're gonna want to find yourself a copy of Episode 9 of Picard. This is just a rip of the Blu-rays, which, yes, I bought a Blu-ray of Star Trek Picard despite not actually finishing it. But, yeah, link in the description for Paramount Plus. But hopefully it's more engaging. Like, hopefully at least stuff happens. It's the penultimate episode. Like, stuff should happen where we left off last episode. Stuff should be going on. I don't know if this is the episode we watch Q die in. that might be the next one. The only, bit of Star Trek Picard I've seen after this point is some pictures. The only thing I can remember is Girardi is, the Borg Queen with her mask off on the La Serena. I think I've seen pictures of Q and Picard talking. Sorry, Guinan and Picard talking. Oh, no, that's right. I've seen Q and Picard talking in, pictures. But the only one I remembered, other than all of those, is I've seen the scene with Will Wheaton. That's the only bit I've seen. It's also just occurred to me, is that a post-credit scene? Because I haven't actually been sticking after the credits. I might have to do that for these ones. I also am paranoid that this isn't actually hide and seek. So let me... Yeah, that was hide and seek. That was also the name, which is good. So let us... oh yeah, don't use that one. I don't know why I put the screen capture so close to, where all the windows pop up. But let us just get rid of these, lovely engine hums. Mute system output. So now, we won't accidentally stream a lot of copyrighted material and get in trouble. So, now for the video, I gotta explain it again. Why am I getting an ad over VLC Media Player? Is that epic? Go away. I'm here to watch Picard, dang it, not play A Pirate's Tale. Yes, for the video, we have to explain it all again. We're going to do a watch-through of Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 9, Hide and Seek. which you're going to want to get a copy of that episode because I can't stream the audio or video, but we are going to do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And on go, we're all going to click play. And then it'll just be me, and it'll all be synced up. And I need another drink. And this will be the first one that we're doing a watch-along for an episode I haven't seen, so it should be interesting. But let's just get started. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Perfect. Nailed it. That hasn't always gone flawlessly. How's my audio? My audio's good. That's good. Actually, no. My audio is quiet. Every time I forget there's like a big previously on as I'm cold and zip up my sweatshirt. So we're gonna get into the mom stuff, I think, this episode, just judging by this previously on. Maybe we'll get the Elnor stuff the same. This is why I don't like previously ons. I feel like I know what's going to happen in this episode. And yes, I know what's going to happen in the next two. But, even if, like, I'm wrong, it still takes away the magic, or, like, the suspense. Because then I get to the end, it's like, oh, I guess I was wrong. It's like my uncle who went to watch The Martian, and I'm gonna spoil The Martian if you care. He went with like a cousin and their friend or something, and the friend leaned over to my uncle at the start and was like, he dies at the end. Which, if you don't know, he doesn't die in the end. But my uncle spent that whole movie watching it, like, really angry. Like, man, he's doing so good. He really wanted, like, what the guy's, I don't know, Mark Watney, is it? He really wanted him to survive. And then, at, like, the end, when he did survive, the movie was ruined. Because, like, he spent the whole time still going, like, man, I want him to survive. This is, like, 2 minutes of recap. I know that it's an episode a week, like, it's kind of hard to remember, but still. Now, I did just learn that she was going after the Lost Arena. Which, yeah, wait. Oh, I guess she's trying to build a new collective, because if she's trying to go back to the future, that would be weird, because there's no collective in the future. This future. Well, again, they fixed the future. I'm so confused still. Have they won? Like, if they were to go to the future now, would it just be our prime timeline? I'm so confused. If they fix the timeline, how come Guinan doesn't remember Time Zero? So I guess they haven't? This is actually really weird, by the way. I haven't seen this episode, but I'm like, oh, this is Picard, Season 2. I was about to wonder why Girardi was still in her dress. But this was not what I imagined when I considered her getting armor. I imagined, oh, she's probably just, like, you know, well, what she's doing now. She's all protected and stuff. She's got Borg armor or whatever. I also don't know why, but that looked like a picture that they, like, animated over. It felt really unnatural, not like a video. Give me a moment, because my headphones are going weird, and I'm going to turn on subtitles again, just in case. There we go. I don't know. I feel like there were about that many people in the room with Soong, but not. I don't know. I felt it was a little less, but they're in the ballpark at least. They're probably exact. Like, what do I know? So we thinking like Borg this episode, Q the next. That could be the way they do it. I do wonder though, like, what's Q doing now? Because surely as this ISA employee, he could go, like, there's a bomb on the rocket we can't launch. And, like, it's an important mission, you know, you can't just reschedule it. He'd have to give proof. But, you know, surely he could fabricate proof. Or maybe, like, bribe Adam Soong into, like, an actual credible bomb threat. I don't know. Supposedly, he managed to get a phone number working to the point where people 2 years before this is set could call him. I know I did. Also, my gain. Is my gain weird? I think OBS is doing that thing again where it says my audio's exploding. But it's making me paranoid. Almost as paranoid as OBS's go live button, even though I am live. YouTube says end stream, but it still says go live at OBS. It's a good thing they didn't come from the other side of the ship, but I guess she could scan for life forms and then just send the drones to the other side of the ship. Oh no, please. Please don't get the Borg wrong like everyone does. Oh. The way for me, either I have to take this is like Girardi's wrong and this line is empty, they're misunderstanding the Borg, or Girardi's right and you've taken the misunderstanding of the Borg, made it the real one, and it's just like another nail in the coffin of like the Borg. I'm one who thinks that literally Q Who was when the Borg started going downhill. It was just their first episode that made them interesting, which I hope isn't Q Who now thinking about it. No, Q Who is the first. Okay, two things. The ship can make a hologram out of anyone who's on board. That's ethically a bit concerning, like the scans they're doing. But also, why Elnor? Because, like, it's the ship's combat protocol, surely. If it learned combat from Elnor, who never fought on the ship, that would be even more concerning. Ethically. They needed, the reason it's Elnor, I'll tell you why, is because the actor needed something to do being dead. Oh, that's how they do it! They can make a hologram out of everyone on the ship, it's Elnor, and that's what it is. Like, in the past, it was a hologram of Elnor that died, not the real one. That's how they do it. What happened to his body? That's a question. Ukrainian scrimshaw, Borg started going downhill after the first time they appeared in TNG. Yes. Q-Who is the first and only proper hive mind I think I've ever seen. Everything after that. Every episode didn't bring them downhill. I don't think Hugh did. But their second appearance was when it started. Oh, there it was. I think that was the Columbia-class refit. Yeah, look at it. I think that's the Eagle Moss model. Not in front of the child, because, you know, we can't have the child in the 24th century know about this. Oh, they said the name. By the way, with subtitles on, it's really throwing me how the French spell maman. It has an N at the end. It's man is how they spell maman. Bit of a side note, but as soon as, like, it got, oh, there's civilians here, they're being shot at, like, realizing how horrible this is, I realized how pathetic these gun sound effects are. Like, the guns themselves are fine, but there's, like, little pew, like, Western hit the Splatoon thing. I like the Gary 7 reference, though. With this little, that, you know. Why? Why? Oh. I mean... Barely, but if this is why they leave him behind, I'm gonna be very upset, because... Also, remember how that cop went missing when they investigated Chateau Picard? God, I hope they don't send the, like, French police up here now. Oh. Wow. Why is he in a green screen? That's the second time this episode I've commented on the special effects. Like, that looks so fake. Which is weird, because the rest of the season hasn't been. Look at how fake that looks. They're now even closer than they were in the last shot. Could they legitimately not film this? Oh. Okay, Q has a plan. That's good. It was the plan from the beginning. that I said that would be easy. Maybe a reshoot and where time press or something. Yeah. Um, I mean, sometimes it's just bad for whatever reason, but if there was like some reshoot or even weirder read scripting, like maybe Brent Spiner was unavailable on that day or something. Um, it would be the second time though that there was a last minute major adjustment because the reason for the copy paste fleet is a last minute major rewrite to the script. Like the guy who designed it, I think had like a few days or a week to hand something in, and that's why it's an old design from a game. But yeah, that was weirdly for such a relatively simple effect that I guess they didn't have those big whatever, the Mandalorian rooms at this point, but hey, that might be the last ever horrifically green screen shot in the franchise. Think of that. That might be the last horrible like, what do you call it? The imposing whatever green screen is in the franchise, huh? I still remember when the third Doctor found out the green screen existed. I'll say, though, in this quieter bit, so far this is much better than the previous few episodes. Like, things are happening. I am talking over it. We're kind of making fun, but, it's one of the more engaging ones so far, definitely. Right, 'cause I noticed they're never on screen together for that scene. Camera just switched vantage point between them. They are far away, but at the same time, like, what would Brent Spiner have been doing? I guess, I think he was in another show or something, but I wouldn't be surprised if they actually went to a French forest or something and soon couldn't go for that day. She just had faster reflexes than a Borg drone, by the way. She's not good at hide and seek, I will say, I haven't mentioned it before, but does anyone else, like, I've never been in a chateau, but does anyone else find it weird that there's, like, a dangerous, very easy to get lost in, like, kids can't go down wine cellar in this house? Maybe that's normal. Maybe there's, like, World War II set up that, that's why it's so crazy that I'm just not connecting or missed, but... Like, this is a secret door, I guess. It's probably the World War II thing. But that is something I found odd about this whole thing. Like, my dad's house actually has, like, a wine cellar. Because the neighbor was, like, good at building castle-y sort of things. And so one of the rooms, it's like a closet that has stone walls. But it's not, like, a French chateau. But It's just kind of weird to me. Like, I mean, huh. You have a great memory. Oh, here we go. Weird it's not a museum again, but... Okay, this makes more sense, yeah. I still don't get why. Like, I get you, maybe he gets lost, but... What's dangerous about it? Are there, like, World War II mines or something? Like, that's the one thing they haven't really explained to me, is, like, why is it dangerous? To the point where everyone's commenting on how dangerous it is. Not like, this is a real maze. They're like, wow, this is dangerous. You could die down here. I mean, does Prodigy go very badly? Wait, no, maybe that's why they let the Prodigy crew through. Is like, Seven tried to join, they rejected, which I hate, by the way, but, like, fucking Picard was assimilated. But anyway, they're like, oh no, guys, she's gonna do it again. Just let her have these kids. Who were, might I add, also assimilated. Well, at least Zero was. I wouldn't have commented that this looked fake if it weren't for the previous two scenes. I'll say that. That's what I'll say about that cut. Wait, he's a hologram. Sure he can. Just don't project himself. Can a hologram with the safeties on fire a real gun? Huh, now we're getting into, now that they've invented AI, we're getting into some weird ethical edge cases that no one programmed. Yes, he's a combat program, but at the start of the season, Seven had to turn off the safeties for the combat program. I mean, okay, I guess the only reason I think he's fine enough to help is because, like, everyone in shows is fine when they just get shot in the arm, and, like, he's acting fine. He just took off his jacket, but really, I've never been shot in the arm, but he's probably not fine. Just wait till you figure out what's gonna happen in 2 years. Actually, yeah, could you imagine being these two people living through World War II, like, especially her, having seen all these miracle cures, and then watching the world end? What did he see? Because I didn't. Yeah, oh, I guess it's just the lack of dust and debris. Also, they all just walked into that corner of the room that had nothing, and they were like, "Where are you, Picard?" Could you imagine just going into the corner? And then he's like, "Oh, it happens to be there." She's getting better at hide and seek, though. Some of them. Some of them. This, again, would be a great story 300 years before, because, like, this would be fine if we couldn't cure what she has, but we can easily. Well, maybe we can't, but, like, they could. And so instead it becomes just, like, horrific, where you take... She's refusing treatment, but she's literally like, my life is just done now. I'm just waiting to fade away and die. I'm not my full self. And the husband in particular is sitting around like, well, I guess I'm not gonna go to the doctor about this one. And I wonder if maybe like a Picard would have mentioned this to someone and... Oh, okay, never mind. He did try and do something about it. I was gonna say that would have gotten the doctors to the Picard residence, but not if he did something on his own. My problem is the society that has to exist for this story to happen. And that's what's ruining it. Other than that, so far, like, yeah, it works. It's a fine story doing what it wants to tell, not knowing the ending. What are they gonna do, actually? Oh, wait, does he have a mobile emitter? Why? Because if they shoot the mobile emitter, he's gonna die, but... I thought the ship was covered in, like, holographic emitters. Wait, so is it... Okay, no, this is a horrific... I know it's in the dystopia. It's the dystopian ship, but this is horrific. Like, the scan is scanning everyone to a point... that you can recreate someone with like enough of their memories and experience and abilities to that's God, I hope that they don't allow the prime timeline La Serena to do this, which, might I remind you, is a cargo ship. Oh, and this is another instance that sci-fi, but Star Trek has done again, where I guess usually it's like someone imagines the person apologizing, but this is like when, this isn't, well, I guess this is Elnor. Okay, it is Elnor that died for him. This is also still horrific. This... So is everyone immortal now on the La Serena? Like, if you die on the... They can just make a new one of you? That's a hologram? Because if Picard is still Picard, and if Holo Janeway is Janeway, and, like... The thing is, my ethical interpretation, I've said before, like, yes, this is apparently that same Elnor that died. If Picard is still Picard, then to, like, the characters in the show, then this is just Elnor. So did they resolve Elnor by killing him and then bringing him back as a hologram? Because that would be 2 seasons where a main character died and they just brought him back as an artificial person. That's also not very well done. Did some COVID thing happen at, like, the end of production? Because the rest of the series has been fine. And as a whole, the VFX have been good, as, like, across the franchises. Hologram using a real sword. Yeah. Which does, again, bring in some questions on the effectiveness of the safety protocols. But... the mobile emitter's really getting to me, though. How do they have a mobile emitter? Because that was 26th century technology. We only have because the doctor from Voyager got it from a time traveler. But if Time Zero never happened, where's the mobile emitter coming from? Because that's even, like, the doctor's mobile emitter. And... I guess that was enough. That his sword disappeared as well. His real sword disappeared with the hologram, as did the mobile emitter. It's okay, you can just make a hologram of her. There's no stakes anymore. Like, you could just make a new person with their full experiences until moment of death. Like the Borg, for example, who were born purely organic as a species and then overcame it. Or the Q, who, well, I guess I can't say overcame death anymore. There was that Soong, who put his mind in Data, who overcame death. There's Picard, who is only mortal because they programmed him to be. Ukrainian Scrimshaw, right, is a Voyager stan, and that part, mobile emitter, really irked me. I guess they reverse engineered the doctors after Voyager got back. That's fine. I'm saying, how did Voyager happen in this timeline? That's my complaint. If there are time travelers of the future, then how come they're not currently trying to prevent Picard from corrupting what they see as the proper timeline? We don't even need Voyager for them to encounter the Borg, because we're after Prodigy. Like, the Federation, the Confederation could just have their own protostar. Maybe they have their own Voyager, sure, but if we're saying it's that similar, how come Time Zero never happened? Yeah, exactly. We'll talk after last episode. After last episode? You mean the last episode, or? I mean, technically, they seem to join the Federation way in our future, but maybe she dies. Not the one that Riker and Worf were from when the Borg won. I don't like it when they say, like, this always happens across infinite timelines. What about the timeline, the only life in the entire universe for now, the past, present, and future, was the Borg? What about that timeline, Girardi? What about the timeline that's exactly the same as the Prime timeline, but right now, every species in the universe except the Borg just so happened to suffer a heart attack at exactly the same moment? Everyone. It is horrifically improbable, but in an infinite universe, it has to have happened. I blame Infinity War. I'm gonna be honest. At least when Doctor Strange did it, he only looked at a lot of timelines, you know, not all of them. Oh, so she joins with the Borg Queen. Please no. It's... So, in my mind, the only thing that separates this from a cult is the flat team structure. First off, we've also had the Borg Queen just, like, you know, your major villain completely turn around because from, like, this one talk. Also, this is a lot of assumptions that, like, the families wouldn't, who also have connotations on these Borg, Seven just dying on the ground, like, wouldn't go after this voluntary collective because they see it as a cult. But, like, is a cult with a flat team structure a bad thing, is the, like, ultimate moral question, I think. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to discuss this after the episode. Is a cult with a flat team structure, and then, more specifically, is this cult okay? A cult with a flat team structure is like a communist dictatorship. It's a contradiction in terms, yet somehow it could exist. He's also got a whole crew who's in danger. You know. That also wasn't the best effect. Like, I wouldn't have noticed it, I don't think, if it wasn't for the start, but what happened? I mean, this is still COVID times, but the Discovery, like, crew did amazing in their third season, in their fourth, like, with all the ships and stuff. People are harder, but it's just weird. It's not weird that it's so bad, it's weird that it's so bad compared to the other parts of the franchise, is what's getting me. Also, did Raffi just sit in the corner while the Queen and Girardi had that talk a while ago? Oh, wait, this is a dark timeline pistol. No, that makes perfect sense. I was about to wonder why the Federation would ever build such a weapon that would explode if the wrong person held it too much. See, setting it in the dystopian timeline did fix a lot of problems. She's assimilate. She's assimilated to exactly the point she was before, which is handy. But, wouldn't she have become re-assimilated when they went back to the future? And if she wouldn't have, that would imply that when they went back to the future, their original versions would have been there, too. Because that's a point. This isn't their prime timeline selves. Q took their minds and plopped them in their alternate universe bodies. So if those bodies went into the future, there would be two sets of all these characters. If that's how they got back in time, back to the future was the slingshot maneuver. If it's Q, then yeah, sure, anything could happen. But then that makes that whole 7 scene a bit redundant. I was wondering about that. This was my thought for a lot of this. Why was she saying Picard's name until right before he opened the door? Okay, night, good. It's nighttime. That was my other complaint. Oh, did he let her out? Oh, fuck. So it does tie back into TNG. Fuck, so, okay, that adds a lot to that scene that I always loved. I want to bring it up now. Just look at this room, right? Right here. I intentionally tried to leave this scene alone as it happened. We'll get to why. There's some things more important than Star Trek. But how the fuck did she get a rope on that ceiling? That's amazing. Oh my god, that was like the highest ceiling I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. I don't know. I might touch that after the episode and let it continue, because there's going to be a lot to talk about there. So we're probably going to leave that till after the episode. I feel like now, though, right now, within the last 4 minutes of the 9th episode, is the first time the theme of the series has come to the light. Is right now. Which is a problem. The fact it was written hung instead of hanged maybe speaks to the inexperience of the writing crew. I'm gonna be a bit hypocritical here in the comments I made about this scene. But I think you're splitting hairs a bit on a scene that actually tried to do moral, tried to do really good. I'm gonna say it did for the most part. But you just listened to Captain Picard describe how he was responsible and how he watched his mother's own suicide, and you're going to get stuck on the fact that he said hung instead of hanged. I will also say my comments about how was she hanging herself and asking for Picard's help, because what we now know about that sequence of events is that the audio and the video were from different points in time. I think most people would say hung herself, even though I know it's wrong. I mean, remember when Riker said sucked out into space and Data corrected him to blown? People make mistakes. It bothered me, yes. Okay, if it bothered you, that's fine. If you're saying it's bad in part because of that, then I'm gonna say that there are some things more important than grammar. Wait, hang on. Why didn't... Could Girardi not have stuck around to, like, take him into the future? I think we're ending, though. I'm not gonna skip to the after the credits just so we're synced up if there is an end credits screen, but don't pause, because as I said before, I think it's episode 10, but I've realized the Will Wheaton thing was probably a post-credits scene, so I'm just gonna turn down this volume for myself. I'm kind of waiting to see if we get a post-credits. I don't think so with the time left. Let's do little things before we get to the big thing. Yeah, the Borg Queen... I know. I think I'm going to get a tad hypocritical here again, because I think you could make the same criticism for Steven Universe, which I praise more than anything else. We had the villain of the Borg Queen being completely turned around in a way of thinking because of that one talk. And sure, it's a bit more in that, she sees the multiverse, she knows her other timeline, she's been with mind melded with Girardi, and hang on, that looks like the end of the video. Actually, let's keep the bar up there. But it would work for me if the Borg timeline knew that if two things, the whole point of the Borg was to keep the Queen company, and if in the infinite multiverse the Borg are always defeated and the Queen dies. That one timeline where the Borg won from the episode where there were all the Enterprises and, like, Worf was jumping between times. Don't ask me what episode it is. It's the TNG one with a runabout? No, that's a different one. But anyway, that's not proof, because in theory they could have been beaten later. Weird that the Queen could communicate with her future alternate timelines, but I said before, that just doesn't work, because yes, it is stupidly improbable that every single form of life in the entire galaxy, aside from the Borg, would suffer a massive heart attack. If we're going with the infinite multiverses where every like what multiverses probably would be if they exist, sort of quantum multiverses, if it's possible, not only could it have happened, but it has to have happened in an infinite number of ways at every single instant of time. Universes, unfathomable infinities of universes are created in which every life form in the universe except for the Borg suffers a massive heart attack at exactly the right instant, exactly the same moment, and no other form of life emerges throughout all of time and space. That happened. There's the one where first contact happened, but the entire crew of the Enterprise suffered a massive heart attack at, like, exactly that moment, and then the Borg won. But also, I said before, like, from Seven's own mouth, the Borg are about perfection in reaching that goal, and this is what the Borg did. They worship Omega. They don't assimilate the Kazon. What the Kazon would be interesting. They'd be new company, new friends, but you don't. The sheer fact that the Borg have the ability to take over the entire galaxy if they just wanted to, yet don't, is proof that it's not just about growing the collective. It's about, at the very least, something else. You know, there's a whole lot of evidence to support it's about achieving perfection. But even if you're saying that's a lie, but even if we accept all that, I still think it guts the Borg in the context of everything else we've seen. Because I always liked that they were conquerors, but never to conquer. You could probably quote a lot of things from the Queen that contradict this. You could also do things that support it. But I always like the idea of the Borg, similar to Doctor Who's Cybermen. The Borg aren't the bad guys from the Borg perspective. And I don't just mean that, like, no one's the bad guys from their own perspective. I mean that the Borg genuinely believe that assimilation is better. They genuinely believe that they're a superior form of life, and that, well, the assimilation process is traumatic, it's better in the end. I mean, loads of things are traumatic that we do anyway, because it's just better, like to save a life or something, or I don't know, it's just, in order to fix something, you have to do a bad thing. But, yeah, let's circle back, though, to the mental health thing. Let's start with the biggest picture. I think that would be a great mental health story, a great cautionary tale, a great thing about removing, the taboos of mental health, to actually seek treatment, to talk about it as well. Like, if the Picards, the mom and dad, brought up Jean-Luc on what was happening with his mother and helped him understand, and his brother, who I guess was gone the whole time, this would not have happened. Like, there are a lot of points of failure here that led to his mother's suicide, and all of them are taboos against mental health, the fact that she didn't seek treatment, the fact that Picard, they were trying to hide it to protect the son, the fact that, the father wasn't just forcing it, especially after, like, the mother acknowledges that, like, because of this illness, this disability that is suitably vague, and in a stretch could be, like, probably a lot of things. She clearly didn't like sunlight, the light, the stimulus. I could make that autism if I wanted. I've never seen autism like that, but, sort of overstimulation, pretty common in a lot of mental disabilities and disorders. Suitably vague, like, all great if it was not set in a time where humanity was supposed to be utopian. We were supposed to have overcome these barriers, and beyond all else, we could easily cure it, if not through drugs and medication, medical procedures, to outright remove it, like you would a cancer or something, through therapy and medication, we could cure it, or at least fix it to a point where you could live a normal life. And having that all there in the background, this story needs so much of that society to exist for the Picards to do what they do, for all of those points of failure to fail, that it becomes more horrific than inspirational and doing good. I've talked before plenty of times that Star Trek, especially modern Star Trek that wants to deal with this, is in the very difficult position of there are many groups that need representation. It's great to have representation for, that the Star Trek universe flat out gives no reason for them to exist and no reason they should exist. And they're in a difficult position. That doesn't mean it's impossible. That doesn't even mean it's impossible to do with humans. For one, we've established, like, Tasha grew up in a hellhole. It was a human colony that had left the Federation or something. It was a hellhole. Tasha deals with rape gangs, and it's a horrific planet. You could have something like that, but there should have been, in general, I said the writing wasn't too great. How we got to the ending wasn't great. But in isolation, I think, yes, that was very well done. That was very good. It's the context that it exists in the universe that guts it. And there are things more important than Star Trek, I've said before in plenty of cases. My favorite example is the ending of Deep Space Nine. I will spoil Deep Space Nine if you haven't seen it. So you might want to tune out until the time bar comes back. How about that? I've just removed the time bar from my video. When you can come back, it's safe for, like, the end of literally last episode Deep Space Nine spoilers. Hang on, Alex just walked in the room. They've left. Good. By the way, I've seen your comment, Ukrainian Scrimshaw. I'll get to it. But the ending of Deep Space Nine, Sisko appears to Cassidy and says, "Hey, I'm going now, but I'll be back," which doesn't make a lot of sense for the setup, but also kind of guts the story. Like, it doesn't make sense. Why aren't you back now? You exist out of time. You could experience the whole entirety of creation and come back 2 minutes ago. You could actually come back before you left. If you don't know, I'll tell the brief version. They did film an ending where Picard came to Cassidy and says, "I have to go, I'm never coming back." But they decided against that ending and filmed a new one because of the stereotype at the time of the absent black father. And it would have destroyed everything Sisko, Avery Brooks, Corey Lofton had built up of that amazing relationship between the black father and his son, the black single father especially. And so there are things more important than Star Trek, but unless you've never seen a show other than Picard, you don't know about the universe he exists in outside of what Picard has shown you, which for Star Trek Picard, the show about the legacy character, is not the assumption. You shouldn't build that show on that. You should expect the people to be coming in. I mean, heck, it builds off of the main storylines of Picard, deal off Picard, Data, and Seven. In the Borg, so many existing things, that it doesn't just gut the story they're trying to tell, it spins it into something more horrific in a way that's not intended. Like, a suicide isn't itself horrific, but the society had to fail, the people had to fail, the upbringing had to fail. There's so many points of failure that the Federation society should have safeguards for, that just failed, all of them. And, yeah. Which is a shame, because otherwise, it's a good story. I don't even know if maybe Strange New Worlds could have done it. Like, I might have been more apt to agree with the fledgling Federation there, that TOS, a literal interpretation of TOS, the Federation is still, like, very non-utopic. Is that the word? Like, they seem to let people into the Federation without even bothering to check if they're good or not. Early Discovery didn't show a utopia, and Enterprise was still building to it. I think you could have had Strange New Worlds deal with these sort of things, but not Picard. But I understand definitely why Patrick Stewart wanted to tell this story, why he wanted to do it, and why he wanted Picard to have it. It's just, I don't think Patrick Stewart's ever been a great person to make decisions about Picard's character. Going back to Ukrainian Scrimshaw, what you say. No, totally, with reference to the Borg. I have always thought it would be funny to see a show from the Borg's perspective where the Federation and humanity were seen as invasive and predatory. I don't think that's how the Borg sees the Federation. I think they see him as a threat. I think they explicitly see the humanity as a threat. But I think the Borg generally see other species as a resource. Is something that could help them get to perfection. And, of course, whatever species that is, get to perfection. I just remembered. Second Borg episode is Best of Both Worlds with Locutus. That's why it ruined the Borg so much for me. Sorry, that was just a side note. But I don't think the Borg see the Federation as invasive and predatory. I think a lot of other races do, and they use the Borg as a comparison, which I've never agreed with this perspective. Anyway, I was like, the Federation is just like the Borg. I don't understand the logic. I understand the logic they're saying, but sorry, we're done with Deep Space Nine spoilers. There's the timeline back. I see the logic with, like, the Borg and the Federation are the same, but I think there's so many easy counters, and it's like, I mean, maybe at, like, the absolute highest level, but this is why it doesn't matter. No, this is why it makes them fundamentally different. But we have the talk, right? Is this collective that Girardi and the Borg Queen are making ethical? Because I've seen a lot of things online before this was even happening that the reason it could never work, never be ethical, regardless of how ethical the induction is, that everything about it is that there would be no way to withdraw consent once you were in the collective. If this is how the Borg collective works, that is absolutely true. You could never withdraw your consent from the Borg collective. If it is some sort of just telepathy, you're always sharing your thoughts and minds, that's fine. That's basically Betazoid culture, but they're all cyborgs, for example. But it gets even more dubious when Picard is introduced that being a part of the collective is essentially a drug. It's a constant euphoria. It's addictive. Once you leave, you want it back. Functionally, it's a drug. And when you consider that the people who would be joining this collective inherently are the loneliest of the galaxy, the people who can't find a place to fit, don't think they fit in, are ostracized by their own society. The connection itself is enticing. It's why cults succeed. But if it's actually a drug as well, like the euphoria of belonging, and that these cults can engineer is itself functionally a drug. But add to that what the Borg Collective has now been described as, I still think it's horrific, because there's no possible withdrawal of consent. I mean, if you remove kind of these, if you want to say like, oh, you're thinking too much about it, which, okay, if you just want to casually acknowledge the cult because you don't want to think about it, okay. The fundamental difference that the show seems to be presenting between the Borg Collective and this new collective is it's the Doctor Who joke, but the quote-unquote flat team structure. There is no queen. There is no... It's hard to imagine what the Borg hive mind is, because since the introduction of the queen, it's never really been a hive mind. It's like a bunch of individual minds that are kind of connected. The reason I say the first time we saw the Borg is the only time I've seen a hive mind done right. That's a lie, by the way. There's one other. There's one hive mind I think has actually been done right. Is that a hive mind... Like, if I ever had to write a fiction, that had a hive mind in it, first off, it'd be bad, because I'm not a writer. But second, if Star Trek ever met a hive mind, it would be Harold. That would be the name of the hive mind. It would be one persona, one personality that just happens to be divided across a billion minds. It's like this whole society is just this one individual named Harold. He just exists in like billions of places. Now, you might recognize that idea. This isn't where I got it from, but the one hive mind I think I've seen that works is Rick and Morty's Unity, which is essentially that. It is a woman who can sort of like is a parasite, infect other beings, and they become a part of her. Like, she is an individual across billions of bodies. That's the only time I've seen a hive mind actually executed well, aside from the first Borg episode, which didn't even... It left a lot vague, it was just kind of, oh, they're a hive mind, They didn't really show how, as I remember. And the Borg Queen, the Borg have always kind of been presented as some sort of hierarchy since then. Like, there's the Queen leading everyone, or there's the Vinculum leading mini hives in the cube, and it's not really a true unity. It's more just a distribution. So... is this hive mind really just everyone can talk to each other? Or is there some sort of functional control, some oneness where you're actually becoming part of a one? Your biological and technological and personatorial, your personality is literally becoming one and being folded into this individual that is this new hive mind. Stress VK, welcome to the stream. I like how the hive mind and Voyager could exist on a dream plane. I like that idea. No, definitely. That the individuals that make up the Borg collective, a small fraction of them can retain their individuality when they're sleeping and meet up in Unimatrix Zero. I like that idea. That was a fun idea. I liked that. The problem I have with Borg in most of their appearances, all but one, is the hive itself, and how it's kind of presented, how it's structured. Like, even that the Borg had babies. Like, the Borg would just have babies that they didn't assimilate, or assimilated at birth, I can't remember. The implication that, like, the Borg drones sexually reproduce, it's weird with the context of, like, what the Borg became, but I like it, because, like, yeah, hive mind, the one individual would still need to make more of itself, despite the assimilations. But, yeah, there's still too many negative connotations that unless they, like, directly address what living in the hive mind is like. Because I know as well, I'm fully aware of instances of mini hive minds, particularly in Voyager, of formerly assimilated people who, the ones I can think of in particular, there are the 3 people who were in Seven's platoon, whatever you want to call it, who escaped the collective but still remained linked to each other. And it was hell for them. They wanted nothing more than to be separate and be distinct and have their own thoughts. Which implies that, the good interpretation of this cult, that they can just kind of hear each other's thought, is a hell to live through. But, if it's voluntary, if they retain their personality and they like that hell, sure, why not? They're not hurting anyone. The other is a group of rebels who'd gotten away from the collective somehow. It was like a planet of ex-Borgs, but they liked the togetherness of the collective. They just didn't want to be controlled, or they didn't... this is a problem, is they're too long ago to remember. Chakotay, I think, interacts with this planet a lot, or at least in the episode they're in. But I feel like I remember when they turn on their hive mind bits, they are a collective. They become the one mind, the quote-unquote herald. That's what that's what we're going to call these hive minds now. We're going to have herald. That's the name of this collective, the collective entity that is made up of all these individuals. No individual exists and remains constant. It's a new person named Harold, made up of all the other individuals. But if that's the case, you can't withdraw consent because you don't exist anymore. Once you become Harold, you're gone. In theory, you could leave Harold. You could be disconnected, like, Seven, like Hugh, like loads of people. But you have no way to raise your hand and go, I'm done with this. This isn't what I wanted. I want myself back. You can't do that if you're Harold. And I feel like that's what the collective would have to be. Especially when that Voyager episode probably really is our first good look at what is a collective they choose to be in. Here's the thing, the reason I'm aware of this is I was fine with that collective. I'm not sure what the difference is. I think it's, for one, we didn't have this, the collective is a drug analogy at the time. Going back, it's going to be interesting to see my thoughts on that episode. Maybe I'll pull it up randomly and watch it after Picard. But, Jurati and the Queen are going out recruiting or finding these lost souls, whereas that group in Voyager existed. They escaped together and they kind of went, actually, let's just keep this thing going, but let's do it our way. Let's keep Harold going. We'll make a new Harold, separate from the Borg collective. And I think it's the thing that, intentionally, I think it's explicit that Jurati and the Borg Queen are targeting the vulnerable, lonely, and outcasts who feel they don't fit in. That is explicitly who they want to go. To help, yes. But what is that help? As if it's becoming Harold, if it's losing yourself, removing yourself, it's horrific. It's no different than a cult. There's just no cult leader. And even then, is Jurati going to become the cult leader? Is she going to become someone that everyone looks up to? Like, if they're retaining some level of individuality. Imagine yourself from the perspective of a parent whose kid went off and joined. 13-year-old kid went off and joined this collective. You would not be all hunky-dory about this. You would see it the same as the Borg. You would declare war on this collective to get them back because this is a horrific cult. Well, I guess when we see Jurati interact with Picard in the next episode, I imagine it's just going to be Jurati from, picture scene, whatever. But if we see Harold, this is one entity, it's the nightmare dystopia. And even if we take away all these connotations from the show, Their moral message is good, connection, reaching out, I guess, but everything they set up to the Borg Collective to be, the legitimate one, not this new nice one, is like some sort of drug, whatever, that like, once you get away, everything they've set up. And then they're specifically going to go out to the lonely, vulnerable, the same people real-world cults would go after to indoctrinate into, and to bring them into their collective, and that's good, is what the show's showing. The real-world connotations, I've said before, perhaps we're extreme, saying, like, Star Trek Picard is going to make it so more people enter cults. Law of numbers, I don't think it's impossible. But if you take it to the less extreme examples, as I've said before, of, insecure teenagers, I mean, people in general, but the reason I say teenagers and in school, changing everything about who they are, what they are, to be with the cool kids, to be with the clique that's whatever they're interested, that they want, just changing everything who they're going to be. And they'll feel that same rush, that connection that this show is describing, that you get from what they're presenting is the good belonging, the good resolution for these characters. And that could encourage you to stick with it when, like, long term, it's going to be miserable. Hiding who you are, hiding yourself. And that's my real concern, with Picard. I don't think, especially with this mental, the mental health thing, which could have been done better. Still, like, as I said, I don't think we really got to it till like the last 4 minutes of this episode. If it was a more constant theme through the episode, it would have been stronger. But I don't think it's going to drive anyone to, like, suicide or anything, or despair. Like, no, there is a hopeful message in here. The problem is the hopeful message transfers way too easily to toxic practices and really bad situations you don't want to be in. Stress-Free K, I thought there could be a nice collective, religious in nature, like monks in search of perfection, but also super powerful, like Borgatti. Is that the name? That's better than Harold, I will admit. Borgatti. I mean, I feel like my problem is you've just described the collective, the legit Borg collective. Perhaps not religious in nature, but with the whole striving for perfection. Like, yeah, like monks in search of perfection. What's the difference? Like, the word nice, I suppose, but again, the Borg legitimately believe that assimilation is the best thing. Look at how Seven, after she gets assimilated, describes it even. Like, the Borg offer immortality, sorry. When an individual drone dies, their experience, their knowledge, their memories live on in the collective. Seven is constantly showing advantages of being a Borg. I just don't see the difference. You willingly join this other collective, but if you're someone who just subscribes to the views, or at least sees the point that the Federation is just like the Borg, they're just more open about it, and that's bad. Why is this any different? Because this is even more like the Borg collective, but it's... No, that's just it. It's the same, but even more like the Borg collective. Now, if you don't subscribe to that view like me, fine, you're not in contradiction. Stress VK, the difference is people would freely agree to assimilate. Yes, but I don't know if you've been here, how long you've been here, but could they withdraw their consent afterwards? I still have problems with, like, it's too much like indoctrination into a cult. People freely agree to join cults. That doesn't mean it's good, for example. But setting that aside, if you join this collective, a year later, it's not for you, you've decided, could you withdraw your consent and leave? If everyone is just telepathically connected. That is all this is. That is fine. That is 100% okay. That is Betazoid society, but they're cyborgs. That is fine. Less so when you add in if it's still that like addiction that the legitimate collective gets described at, that euphoria that when you leave you want back, that real addiction. If you become one mind, if your mind, your personality, your everything gets suppressed and becomes a part of the greater whole, like the Borg collective or like this hypothetical Harold or Rick and Morty's Unity, you can't withdraw consent. You cannot decide to leave after you've joined, and that is a serious problem. Episode 10 might address this. They might, if episode 10 gets up and say, over the centuries, we've had people come and go, you know, they've been like, thanks for your time, but I want to do something else now. Yes, you know, this would solve a lot. But again, even in this real world, if it makes sense in universe, it is uncomfortably close to encouraging a lot of bad habits and situations in the real world that I think they were either ignorant or uncaring towards the responsibility and influence this show has, that having an audience like this has and will give you. And it's... yeah, it's too uncomfortably close to a lot of real-world horrific things. And they specifically added lines in Picard that make it even worse. If there was nothing about that euphoria of being a part of the collective and that wanting to go back, that striving, it wouldn't have been as bad. You would have to be able to withdraw freely, but go through special process to ease the transition, because Jurati gave consent. I mean, yeah, if you're actually becoming a Borg drone, it's a process to become de-assimilated. Actually, that is concerning. If they're really like a Borg drone, where they replace the body, whatever, look at the XBs after Hugh, or even Seven, who live with the visual scars of what happened to them. If there's any sort of permanent transformation to these people who willingly join, because they are so inherently so vulnerable and susceptible to what Jurati and the Borg Queen are offering, I still don't think it's moral. Because you can withdraw consent and you can leave, but there's a part that will stick with you, especially if it's Borg. Because look at how Seven and Hugh and all the XBs have described how the galaxy treats them. Even Starfleet wouldn't let Seven join Voyager because she looked Borg on the outside. If it's that, which again, if, it's still horrific. But yeah, that's the big key for me now is, what is the assimilation process in this version? Can it be undone? And can you withdraw consent and leave this collective? There's still concerns about, you know, going after the vulnerable people with exactly what they want, but suppressing who they actually are in the process. But if episode 10 can address those two things, we see a drone, and they're not as heavily assimilated, or we well, I'll say with the exception of Jurati, but even then it's concerning. And can they leave? You know, just a line. We've had people come and go over the centuries, but it's been fun. Everyone's had a good time. Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's just Betazoid society with cyborgs. But I'm realizing as well, the Borg Queen, like the thing Jurati's wearing right now, she took nanoprobes out of, like the Borg Queen suit just left his nanoprobes and went on to Jurati. Like Jurati was butt-ass naked when she put on that suit, or that suit wrapped around her. So presumably you could just take it off just as easily. Maybe slower, like, it might medically take some time to remove, but yeah. I just also can't see the galaxy accepting this collective, regardless of how good it is, because of this prejudice against the Borg, which isn't a reason to do it, but is a thing that should have been addressed when she was like, no one will hate us because it's about consent and community. Well, okay. People hate Seven, and she's not a Borg. She just has implants on her. Well, where the Federation introduces Borg components to their ship, they're gonna shun Seven at the same time, and Hugh and the XBs. But yeah, I'll say though, as a whole, that was a much better episode than a lot of the previous, because things are happening, things are moving. Again, I think, no, its CGI, its special effects were very bad in a lot of the episode, and the times where they weren't, I noticed it when they were like just a bit off. I noticed it because of the things that were so atrociously bad. It suffers from the larger problems of the series. It mitigated some knowing what's happened. Still, it wasn't a pleasant watch getting to this point, but it was definitely one of the better episodes of Picard of this season. I'll say. Borgatti would probably be very selective and only choose candidates like Girardi that would most not want to leave. Akin to gender transitioning. Interesting comparison. I'll get back to that. It would have to have a series of psychovals. I like that. You would have to establish it. But even then, there's concern, at what point is someone psychologically fit to join? Because anyone who would be fit to join and would want this is going to feel like they have nowhere to belong. They're going to be lonely, and that's going to come with a lot of psychological problems. So if someone isn't fit to join, do you say, I'm sorry, even the misfits don't accept you, go back to your miserable life and hope your society improves? Or, there's still... We're not going to have time to explore all these things. But I do acknowledge that, yes, Girardi and the Borg Queen, they could be more selective about who they choose and who they look for, but where's the line then becomes a question that I don't think has a good, clean answer with the group of people that you're talking about. I'm not sure the gender transitioning, as a non-binary person, I'm not sure that gender transitioning analogy works so full, because gender is it's intrinsic. I believe I'm using that word correctly, and it's something you'll know, and it's not going to change. If you're gender fluid, something like that, where your gender does change a lot, that isn't going to change. You're going to know you'll move back and forth, you'll slide across the spectrum, whatever. Being lonely and feeling like you have no place you belong is inherently not a constant. Even if you ignore this collective, there's in theory somewhere in that greater universe that you would find where you would feel belonging. Or even if you don't find people, you could find a hobby or a work or something that you get fulfillment from. And I don't think you can make that analogy, because if you're trans, it's not going to change. You're a boy or a girl, that's not going to change over time. Whereas loneliness is an emotional state, and there can be systemic problems in your environment, in your society, in many, many things, your family, who you know, who you're around with, that perpetuate that cycle, but it's not a permanent state, because it's a state of mind. It's a feeling. It's inherently fleeting. Even if it lasts for years, it's something that could change and something that is practically guaranteed to change, I think. And so, yeah, that's my big problem with it. And if you find fulfillment in the collective, that's fine if you can choose to leave. If you can keep a hold, even if you can keep a hold of yourself. If you can choose to leave but lose yourself, I still think that this is a moral wrong. I don't know how it would work to become a part of Herald, so to say, and leave, but it has to do quite a bit of legwork in the conversation we're going to get at the end of next episode to get me to accept this. Stress VK, I think Borgatti would develop a colony of unsuitable collective candidates that could fulfill other aspects of the collective, so admittedly, they are a small percentage that would make the transition. But then what's that? That's still kind of like, oh, you're too misfit for the misfits kind of thing is what you're telling these people. If there's a barrier to entry, I think it defeats the purpose of being a community and an accepting place if there's a barrier to entry. I don't think you can have both. If you must be at least this lonely to enter, I don't think what they're trying to do works, is my problem with this. And if you're just establishing a collective of unsuitable candidates, then surely that's even more of a cult. Of like, what is it? Are they kidnapping them? Are they like, you can't play with us, but you can play with these other rejects? It could help to, connect people with other lonely people who don't feel like they have a place to belong. But in doing that, you are rejecting these people, which that's just going to do more psychological damage. And again, they could do that, but unless you flat out tell me this is what they're doing, like the show flat out establishes this, then it's a problem. There's a great line in the JXE, I believe it's the 5-hour Doctor Who video, which I talked about a bit yesterday, where he goes, I'm sure that, you're a clever person. I am sure that if you wanted to, you could explain away all of these inconsistencies and problems and make them work. The point is that you shouldn't have to. A good show, a well-written show, let's be more general, a story, a movie, a book, and anything, shouldn't have things that you need to explain away. It should do that for you. Why is it so dangerous under the Picard chateau? Because the French resistance used it during the occupation of World War II. Right? If they didn't have that line, you could have come up with one, but it's still something that the writers should have justified and should have remedied. Maybe they are not ready yet. Maybe on the colony they learned the techniques that might allow them to fully cross over eventually. But what are those techniques? Because what they're offering is connection, is a place to belong. There's no technique to a place to belong. There's no special thing. You just have to be yourself. There is a bit of a hunt, I suppose, in finding the right people, but I can't accept that you'd be in a community so small that the right people aren't around you. And I think we're setting up now more of an indoctrination process where it's the whole thing is uncomfortably close to a cult for me. I like the idea. I think we can make this work. I like the idea of Borgatti having this voluntary collective that's basically everyone's telepathically connected, that is part of getting into this collective offers some sort of course, basically some self-help thing of learning how to be yourself, not what others want, and finding that group of people you want. Like, that's a good goal in itself. Forget the whole collective thing. I think the vast majority of candidates through this process would find that place they belong outside this collective. I think even with each other, this like-minded people all going through similar problems, going through this thing of like learning just to be yourself, accept who you are, and be that person. And if in doing that, you will find the place you belong and the people you can connect with. And the small few who get through that, get that self-confidence, get that assurance, and still say, I want to be a part of this collective. I think that's where you get that full acknowledgement, and it's like, this is what I want. This is what me wants, the true me. I want to be a part of this collective. That's how you make it work for me. If they don't address how this collective works, that is going to be my headcanon. But again, I still don't like the real-world implication, the real-world effects that this storyline might have on the vulnerable watching it, who aren't going to get that, treatment, that counseling. That's what it is, counseling, really. Basically a big summer camp to get into this collective. But it's not a test. It's not a way to weed people out. I think most will just naturally leave because they'll realize that they don't actually want the collective. They just needed to learn how to be themselves and find a group of people they connect with. Stress VK, I'm thinking telepathic techniques would be taught. I don't think you can teach those. But again, this guts the ethical thing of like, to me that says you there, real person watching this show, in order to not be lonely, you need to be a telepath. And that's not a message I want to send. Stress VK, I see it more of a monastery where there's a hierarchy, all reaching towards nirvana. That is a cult, Stress VK. We call that a cult. I think you're trying to make this too structured, whereas what it needs to be is that the collective is just a group of like-minded people who happen to be able to read each other's minds all the time. And the entry process is just the actual help that in a non-science-fi world you would get of just learning to be yourself, learning to accept that, learning to find, not even learning, just finding a group of like-minded individuals who embrace you and who you are. And if you just be yourself, you will find those individuals. And then, after all that, if you still want to join Borgatti, go ahead. But I think that's the only way it's going to work for me. And again, that they can leave. That it's not going to do, like, permanent medical anything, permanent psychological. You could come and go if you wanted. But yeah, hey, if you really just want to live this life as a telepath, go ahead. Fine. You're not hurting anyone. It's what you want. Go right ahead. That collective is a very admirable, applaudable humanitarian organization going across the galaxy. That would tie in, I think, in a lot of ways with the mental health plotline of this show. They're two very different things, but I think if you had planned this out from the beginning, if this is what you wanted, you could have had these tie together very thematically. Whereas now, I guess they're kind of related, but they're separate. Lowell, you're very attached to Discovery's Quat Malat. How do you actually say that? I haven't said it in a while. I heard it. I mean, yeah, but that's just different to me. for many reasons. It's different. I guess you could call it a cult if you really wanted to. When you boil it down, I guess you could call a lot of things a cult. But the Quat-Malot has basically everything I had. First off, I don't think it actively seeks people out. It's just a society. You might be born into it and raised as part of that society, but it's a rebellion against Romulan secrecy. It's just a group of people who fundamentally believe in absolute candor. And yeah, if you agree with that too, come and join us. I guess you have to be a woman. As a non-binary person, I've got some problems with that. But other than that, yeah, it's just, hey, if you believe in our way of life, come and join us. Great. Love that. If that's what most groups of people are. That's what government is. That's what the Federation is if you believe in our way of life, come and join us. But it's different with this Borg Queen thing, both because it's a hive mind and because they're specifically targeting vulnerable individuals who would do anything for connection. They're doing it for perfectly humanitarian. They truly believe they're doing the right thing. They believe they're helping. So do the Borg. Just because you think you're in the right doesn't mean you are. But yeah, this has been a very in-universe analysis of this, which, yes, we want to acknowledge these things in universe, but my biggest problem is the out-of-universe things, the in-real-life things. There are plenty of things I can complain about in Star Trek that don't make sense, and the plots that have been nonsense. This would be one of them. I'll say, Stress VK, this conversation is at the very least giving me a great headcanon to accept this and something that's actually nice, that adds to the Star Trek universe. But none of that changes the real-world effects to me. And look at that, we've now gone for about no longer than the length of the episode talking about the effects. Yeah, Picard's improving on a rewatch, but really only because I get these endings. Like, the journey here was better because I did a lot of chat, with the chat, like, kind of half paying attention to the episode. I'm not angry about the things I don't like. At least not actively. There's some things I still get, like the Rio cigar or whatever. But I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. Yeah, sure. But it's just really unfortunate that there are a lot of what I feel are writing problems and pacing problems and story problems that Season 3, there's no reason to believe it won't share. Unless, by massive coincidence, they don't touch the same things. But even then, it's like pacing. Every story's got pacing. There were 2 episodes there where 3 things happened. It's the best thing I see about a 3rd season of Picard is it's not the best paced. It was fun seeing everyone together. Worf's pacifism was amazing. That, to me, is like the realistic peak of what Season 3 of Picard is going to be. Oh, and Raffi butts in quite a lot, and I wish he wasn't there. Raffi's going to be the new Michael Burnham. In Season 3 of Discovery, I noticed the pattern that I loved Season 3 of Discovery unless Michael Burnham was on screen. Every scene she was in, every time she was talking, doing anything, it was bad. And I want to say she's improved in Season 4. She hasn't. They just made her captain, so a lot of the complaints are mute. Like, she was, she would oftenly mutiny and go against orders to do whatever the heck she wants. Now she makes the orders. Yeah, it made it a much better viewing experience. It didn't fix the problem, it just changed the circumstances. But I think Raffi's going to be that very much in Season 3. And that every time she's on screen, I just wish she wasn't, because she's making it worse. But with that, I was going to wrap it up. It's going to be weird. You won't see me again until next week when we do episode 10. Because I never reviewed episodes 9 and 10 in any way, I want them to be these noon Saturday streams, so in theory as many people as possible can catch them. I know a lot of the last streams have been for work hours in my time zone for a lot of people, and if not, they've been like dinner or just nighttime for a lot of the world. It's been a very America-only stream. The further west, the better these times. Because, hey, I live in the West Coast. I have a job. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. But next week we'll finish off Picard, and I'm glad. I think I'll be glad to have finished it. I'm definitely glad I went back. I'm glad I ended up doing this whole watch-through thing. I think we've gained insight. I think we've learned more about the creative process in creating a show. At least I have. I don't know about you. But the best part of all is I'll finally, next episode, get to do the thumbnail thing I wanted, where in thumbnail 1, it was going from good to evil, now it's gonna go from evil to good, and I was so disappointed when I ended Picard I wouldn't get to do that, but now we'll get to do it. So, with that, thanks for watching, thanks for joining me, it's always great when people join the stream, and I'll